this to you and then we get your...
Hi. It's great to be in San Diego. Unfortunately, I have to fly back to the Central Valley this evening, which is probably about 106 at home. Somebody said, why the hell are you going home? But I also work at the construction of the new Apple campus in Cupertino, and so I'm gone 4 days a week, so anytime I can be home is great. Everybody, I think, got a book and cue cards. We're going to be talking about pruning today as it relates from the nursery all the way up into the landscape. This book was paid for through a grant from CAL FIRE. I'm the director of the Urban Tree Foundation, but I'm also a principal or a partner in a firm called Wood Architecture, which is landscape architecture, horticulture, arboriculture, and agriculture. And we started a program trying to improve the quality of nursery stock for the state of California about 15 years ago. Is this thing, is okay? Okay. And I've known Jim Barnes for, I don't know, 15 years or so. And we've worked together for quite some time. And the goal was to improve the state of trees grown here and get all the disciplines on the same page. And what I thought was really cool about this group is that you're from different disciplines. And that's really a neat thing. And the landscape industry tends to be a bit siloed. And so this group's doing good things by putting everybody in the same room. So this example, happens to be a detail. And up on the internet, it's at Land Effects, it's at ISA, it's at Urban Tree. There are CAD details and specifications that deal with all of landscape as well as tree quality that are open and free to use. And this is a book that we wrote that you can take home, and some cue cards. Notice this, and I'm going to screw this up. Which one's the pointer?
The middle.
Perfect. This is a Quercus agrifolia. Does that look like it's good pruning? How many tree folks work with trees for a living here? Couple? How many landscape architects? Quite a few. Municipal inspectors? Couple. Municipalities? Okay, that's a good group of folks. So yeah, this is not what a young Quercus agrifolia looks like, hopefully, but it does happen at times. So we're going to talk about, there we go. And I'm going to do that several times, folks. I'm going to screw up the presentation several times. What we're talking about today is central leaders and versus codominant stems. This is a Quercus virginiana, or southern live oak. And this is a Quercus virginiana southern live oak. Notice they're both round. Notice they have totally different structure. Why would this be a problem in a parking lot?
Easy breakage of the limbs.
Easy breakage of the limbs. That's correct. So this is my daughter Hannah, and this is Visalia, and this is a Quercus agrifolia with a central leader. And you'll see this is also a root experiment, and you'll see that at the top of this particular tree we have what's called a codominant scaffold, or a branch that is the same as the leader. So this is the dominant leader, this is a codominant leader. And I'm going to use a term called aspect ratio. Has anybody heard the term aspect ratio? It's new, Jim, of course. Aspect ratio is the size of branch in relation to the trunk. And a good structured tree has small aspect ratio branches that are half the size of what they're attached to, and that is desirable. So you can see this actually has a 1-to-1 aspect ratio. That is not desirable. It's not the size of branch, but it's not the, how do I say this? Small branches with large aspect ratio are issues. You can see this is a 1-to-1. And so how do you control that sort of thing from a pruning perspective? And Jim would focus on this sort of thing to maintain a leader in the nursery. And you can see that I've subordinated this branch by reducing it by half. I've cut it to a bud away from the central leader. And you can see the plant responded and pushed the branch out, but the important part is that it slows the growth. Slows the growth on the branch. And you can see from 2012 to 2014, we've reduced the aspect ratio by 50%. You can see that there. So you can see you've subordinated that over a period of time. Do these trees look any different than normal in that there's temporary branches? So my wife, who likes trees, but said, I can't see the front door, I may limb the trees up. What do you notice about the size of cuts there? They're small, right? They're small cuts. In arboriculture, you don't want to make big cuts on the trunk. By subordinating the branches, I'm able to maintain a small aspect ratio and raise the trees up. Anybody been to a parking lot where they cut the trees off to see signs, right? And they whack them off and they whack them off and they whack them off. At a city, what is your first permanent scaffold branch on the street?
8 feet
8 feet on the sidewalk, street side?
on the sidewalk and 14 feet on the roadway.
Correct. Branches stay where they are on the tree and grow larger in diameter if they don't grow up with the tree. So when you plant a young tree that's 7 feet tall, those are really often temporary branches. By keeping those branches in check and keeping them subordinated, you can raise the tree up. And one of the things that happens, and this isn't a nursery, but this happens, or this is historic nursery sort of practices where trees are topped. And nurserymen top trees to branch them. Some trees don't produce branches like, for instance, a jacaranda. Doesn't branch well. If you grow a jacaranda without heading it, it probably won't branch and people won't necessarily buy it. So this was actually done by a gardener. See the heading cuts there? So what I did is I selected a new central leader and subordinated the branches so we can push the leader up. And you can see before and after. Now we reduced a lot of leaf area, right? A lot of leaf area. And ISA says you're not supposed to remove more than 20% of the foliage at any one given time. And that is true on a mature tree. That's not necessarily true on a young tree. And you can see the tree kept growing, growing, and that's where the heading cut was, and that's where the tree ultimately developed. Now, if I hadn't made those cuts, you'd have all your branches growing from one point, and that distributes the weight to one point, which leads to structural defects. You see. So, most important thing to know is branches stay in the same place and grow larger in diameter. They do not grow up with the tree. When you understand that concept, then you can look at where you want the branches in the landscape. A lot of people believe that this branch magically grows up. And what you want for the first permanent scaffold branch is based on the plant's use in the landscape. This works in a front yard, it's not going to work here. So if this tree was planted at this height, none of the branches on this tree at planting exist. So in a nursery setting, what you want is you want a good, strong central leader and temporary branches. Anybody know why you'd want temporary branches?
Develop cheaper and increase the growth of the leaf trunk.
That's right. More leaves means more food, particularly in the young sizes. And people want the young trees to look like a mature tree. You'll notice the nursery industry was driven to limb trees up, cut the tops off, and round them over. And that leads to structural problems, and that's because people's beliefs that young trees need to look like mature trees. This is really ideal in, say, a number 5 or 5 gallon tree where you have all the branches to the ground. I hear that that's a big problem for the buying community to see branches along the, they want to see trunk. So this is downtown Visalia, and we planted 2,500 street trees. And you'll notice there's temporary branches along the trunk, or leaflets. Within 8 years, we were able to train the tree up above signage. So that was really good. Now this is Visalia Community Bank, and this was planted in 1990 when I was a senior in high school. And this is what nurseries used to do, and I pulled this picture off of the internet, so it's fuzzy and crappy, but I don't have many pictures from 1990. I didn't pay attention to trees when I was a senior in high school. But anyway, this was the historic nursery practices, and Jim will tell you this is how it was always done, where all the branches were removed to 7 feet, the top cut off, and the tree rounded over. And you see these lollipop trees like in the first photo of the Corcus agrifolia. This is more what I would plant with a strong central leader and temporary branches along the trunk. This tree is this tree. So does anyone know what's going on? I realize that there's not a lot of folks that work in arboriculture, which deals with the structure, but does anybody know what sort of problem there is there? Recrotch, there you go. Bad structure, right? So what you have here is a bark inclusion. And what a bark inclusion is there's no connective tissue at the top of the union. So this is the strongest angle in nature. They use it in car doors and airplanes. When you have a misfire, you get bark that embeds at the top of the union, and that's why you see trees fail. So that comes often from the nursery heading cuts. And that's why this is a big deal and why we specify trees shall have a central leader. Because this defect that developed at the nursery. And then was pruned by Parker plumbing truck because the scaffolds were too low. See that? Now, when you're buying a tree, you buy time, right? So a number 15 costs $48 to $50. A 24-inch is $160, 36, or so on and so forth, to where you're buying time. How much time did I lose? This tree is probably 10 to 15 years old. What's the economic loss to the poor structure that happened at planting and wasn't dealt with? So all the trees around that building were all the same. These are all trees that I planted in about 2010. And you can see they're both round. This is one's grown, not 2000, sorry, 2000, not 2010. These were planted in 1990, these were planted in 2000. And both trees are round, but notice the structure is totally different, where these have codominant branches and the branches start a lot lower. And you can see codominant branches. See the height of the first permanent branch. Now notice we've kept the aspect ratio of the branches small. This one is probably too large, and I would have liked to subordinate that one more aggressively, but I was learning as I was doing. We prune the trees once a year for the first 10 years, all of them, and we would go through to get the scaffolds above signage because clearance is an issue. Anybody been to downtown San Diego? See the jacarandas getting torn up by everything, the branches starting at this height? What happened on many of those trees is they were planted from the nursery where they were branched at 7 feet and nobody trained them. So, and it has to continue for 10 or 15 years until you get your clearance. You can see here's a reduction cut here, and we continue on and then pretty much let the tree go. This is a form of pruning called lion's tailing. Does anybody know what lion's tailing is? I know Sam. Lion's tailing is a pruning practice where the inside of the foliage is stripped and left outside of the foliage left alone. It's really bad. It's a bad pruning practice, lion's tailing. It's not recommended. And what you'll notice by lion's tailing, it's pushing the growth out past the crown of the tree. See how that's out here like this? it causes structural stress at that union. And you can see by trying to clear the sign, because Visalia Community Bank pays money to have a sign here, and anybody who works in the planning department will tell you you only get that one sign in that location, and they pay money for that. So we clear it this way. It's not a good way to clear. A good way to make clearance is a strong central leader and being able to raise the trees above signage. And see, these trees are about 10 years apart. They're both round. They have totally different structure, but the outside form is identical. And you can see, here's the branches. This is my lovely wife, Sandra, planting this tree. There's where the branches were. So ultimately, we removed the nursery crown. So hopefully we get it right the second time. And you want to avoid these defects that heading causes without retaining a central leader. So we're going to get into, it's okay to head the tree if you retain a central leader. How many people want to buy that one? Who runs to the store and says, I want the Linus tree? Give me the Linus one, right? So this is what's driven our cultural practices to leads to bad structure, because the structure of trees in California that are planted are very poor in general. And as you learn more about it, we'll drive around and look at stuff and say, oh no. But so a lot of trees, jacarandas, Chinese pistache, will not throw a permanent scaffold branch. So the nurseries head them. When you head them, it breaks the auxin and forces branching to develop. So it's a sellable product. This will turn into a really good tree, believe it or not. The Linus tree is a good tree, but it's not sellable. This is a Raywood ash, and you can see the heading cut that was made here. And notice all the branches have gone upright. And the branches stay in the same place and grow larger in diameter. Is there enough room? And this tree gets to be, 3 feet caliper. Is there enough room for 1, 2, 3, 4 branches all in that space? Is it going to fit? No, it's going to turn into this, right? This is a bark inclusion. And if you look really closely, you'll see this tree is bolted together, right? So I got called in to look at this situation. It's a city, and the mayor loves his trees. Loves, loves, loves the trees. And I said, okay, this is great, but you're going to cut them all down. What are you talking about? You're the tree person who brought you in to look at the trees. That's right, you got to cut them down. Because a good attorney, if this fails, because trees don't heal, they do what's called compartmentalize. They compartmentalize around wounds. And you're ultimately going to get some decay in this, and sure enough, it's going to pull this bolt through, and it's probably going to happen when Mr. and Mrs. Jones are walking down the street, and the good attorney is going to say, well, you knew there was a problem because you bolted it together. This can't be fixed at this stage. It can be fixed at this stage. So this can lead to this. And that's why, folks, the municipal inspectors that are saying, I need a tree with a central leader, that's what they're talking about. Because there's only so much you can train this defect out, but after years 3 or 4 after planting, you're not going to train it out. You're stuck. Your structure is stuck. So you can head the tree. So there is some misconceptions. Heading or is topping, and we're referring to that subject matter. We're talking about 1/2-inch wood, 1-inch wood. We're not talking about topping an 8-inch cut on a mature tree. Those are very different things. You have heartwood and sapwood. And when the tree is young, it does not have the heartwood. Sapwood does not decay. So heading the young tree to branch it, which is a common practice, correct? And not an undesirable practice, provided the central leader is retained. And this is Brightview, which was Valley Crest. They just happened. And this is J. Frank Schmidt and Son in Oregon. And you can see this line right here? That's where a heading cut took place. This is a Gladitsia. They don't like to branch. They would have been the Linus tree that none of you would have spec'd. It has shown up on the job site, and you said, no way. So it's got to have branches. So it's headed here And then these branches are cut back to buds away from the central leader to subordinate the growth, to keep a small aspect ratio so they don't become codominant stems. Does that make sense? And we use bamboo to pull them up to have a nice, straight, sellable, marketable plant. And if this is a street tree in downtown San Diego, first permanent scaffold branch is up here, meaning it doesn't exist yet. You remove them. If this is in your yard, this is about 7 feet, you can have a 7-foot branch tree. So, Bradford pear. Do we have those in San Diego? Anybody ever see one break? Because they break a lot. Bradford pear is a plant that the industry has destroyed by heading. It's genetically predisposed to bad unions. When you cut the top off and walk away, you end up with this sort of thing. And all of these branches, there's not enough space in this area, and you'll get structural defects. This is a Bradford pear unheaded, left alone. Notice they're small aspect ratio branches, meaning the branches are small compared to the trunk. This is one headed. This is one that was headed and then a central leader retained. These two are both desirable. This one is not. This tree and this tree are the same trees. We just did corrective pruning. So in the specifications and details that we put out at the ISA, which are designed for landscape architects, it says in the crown observation that you should have a central leader and that this is okay. And you have the option to request that this be made into this if you can't get them. Now, if you can find a landscape contractor that knows how to do that, that would be a good thing. But it's not out there in the industry. It's better to call your nursery and provide them a set of specifications and let them know what you want. So to show kind of how this works and what kind of drives this stuff culturally, again, I planted a lot of trees in the downtown. This is a Quercus suber, and people would break them, and I would get angry that I'd be out there watering these damn things at 4 in the morning and someone would break one. And so I got sick of it. So I started just cutting them in half below where the break was. And then I would select a new shoot right here. See, I cut that there after someone broke it, selected a new shoot. This is 6 months after that heading cut. This is a full year after that heading cut. This is what the tree looked like at the end of the season. Looks pretty good. We like temporary branches. Temporary branches, which is just a branch that's going to be removed at some point, leave more leaf area. We keep them in check, but we like to protect the trunk and more growth. And then the very well-meaning landscape gardener makes a removal cut to a branch growing down. So they top the tree to a branch going down. Why would they do that? Because they think the tree is supposed to be round. And magically, this turns into a crown. So the cultural practices drive that round structure. Young trees look more like shrubs, pyramids, ideally. They don't look round when they're young. This is a Quercus suber. This is a big round tree at maturity. So I cut the branches back, pulled up a central leader, retrained the plant over a period of time. Here it is. That's where the first heading cut was. The second one's up here. And that's what the tree looks like. If I'd left that tree alone, it would have had a terrible structural defect. So aside from purchasing or specifying a good structured tree, advocating, because landscape architects often do maintenance plans and they have direct contact with the owner. Waiting till year 15 to go in and develop the structure is not going to get it there. It's cheaper to prune a small tree than a big tree. We should be investing in the first 10 years and then maintaining our clearance, leaving things alone. We tend to let it go for 15 years and then you have a structural problem that you can't solve. So this is kind of why, this whole slide set of why I think I was asked to come here is there's some disagreement amongst the industry on central leaders and whether a tree can be headed or not. Central leaders are really good for trees.
for particularly large growing shade trees. It is okay to head them. What is most important is that a new leader is retained and branches subordinated. So the nursery person makes a sellable plant that is structurally sound. So you can see good structure. These are both platanus. You can see this large aspect ratio branch, these two have choked out the leader, and this is no good. Notice these are smaller than what they're attached to in well space. This is very desirable. This is a before and after. And this is real tree. This is a Pistachia chinensis and part of the training process. And my wife called me one day and said, hey, they pruned your tree. And so I went there and I said, oh, shoot, signage, and I should have got it up higher earlier. And so I went in there and the cook went after it. So they did a pretty good job. So I called Sandra back and I said, I pruned it. Looks good, right? But believe it or not, it regrew. Because heartwood and sapwood are different, right? Heartwood can decay, sapwood can't. At this stage, there is no sapwood. My point of this is I headed the tree fairly aggressively. It's not the heading cut that's the problem, it's the not retraining the tree that's the problem. And over a period of time, selected the leader, subordinated the branches, see the reduction cut to branches going away, some removal cuts of big branches, and over a period of time, this is Tyson again in my office, and tree looked pretty good. So it's the heading of the leader that when I first started this working to get nurseries to grow central leaders, we thought, well, if you head the tree, you ruin it. That's absolutely not true. Nurseries have to or often need to head certain trees of certain species to make a sellable plant. The key is retaining the central leader and avoiding these large aspect ratio branches. You'll see this is a small branch here, big branch here. This is a 1-to-1 aspect ratio. This is a 0.5 aspect ratio. Notice there's a reduction of caliper from here to here by 50%. So when you have a codominant branch, you'll see a reduction of caliper, and that is not desirable. You can see, and one option would be to reduce it. The other option is remove it. Good strategies for nursery are remove the big woods low on the tree. Chinese elms, for example, I do see them down here. They're branched too low, they develop too low, and they get in the way. So I showed you where we removed 100% of leaf area. Not that desirable, but doable. And here's one you remove 5%. This is better. As you can see, the trees grow as the theory of uniform stress. So when that codominant branch was removed, you see the reduction from here to here. Notice the taper developed more uniformly once that branch was gone. So Chinese pistache. Jim, does this meet the spec?
One on the right?
Either of them. They're the same tree. So you can see codominance, headed, no leader.
Yeah, I don't like the one on the right.
Well, it's just a bit different angle. So that doesn't meet spec, does it?
No.
So if I was inspecting that tree, I would reject it. I would reject it because it was headed, ooh, I gotta watch that thing. Headed here. These are the same size. That was headed again, no central leader. How's this one? Better?
Much better.
So you can see subordination cut to slow the growth on that codominant branch and a good strong central leader. So this one would meet spec. So just because the tree was headed doesn't mean it no longer meets spec. What we're asking for in the specifications is that you have a good strong central leader at time of sold. So same tree. This one meets the specifications. I would accept this all day long on any job of any quality. This one I would say nope. I would reject it. So now that you're all experts on structure, These are liriodendrums. They're identical shape on the outside. They have totally different structure. Which one's really good structure and which one's not so good? This one's really good structure, huh? So if I have to, let's say this is Berkeley and I'm going to put a street in here and I got to raise this up, I can do so making 1 and 2 inch cuts, right? If I have to raise this one up and I remove that, I end up with half a tree. And liriodendrums are poor compartmentalizers, meaning they decay really bad. So this one's easy to maintain and significantly stronger than this one. The important thing is this turns into this before your eyes very slowly. So that's really the key, is that codominant branch left unchecked at 7 feet is very hard to deal with in year 15. And ideally you specify something with a good strong central leader that you don't have that happen. So basically subordination, which you heard me mention, is a process of keeping a branch in check or slowing it down. The more wood you remove for it, the slower that branch is going to go relative to the other parts of the tree. And so this is a good aspect ratio. This is a bad aspect ratio. This is 1 to 1. This is 0.5 to 1. Make sense? Okay. So just some training. And these you have to say, and you mentioned you were planting 72-inch box. This is like a 72-inch box size of plant, and what the nursery should be doing, because this would be on a Corcus lobata, your permanent structure. If this would be not good on year 15. And the way to deal with it is subordinate it. So you have a before and after. You'll notice that over a period of time, this starts growing slower and the central leader takes off. And that's what it looks like later. Sometimes you remove them. Tree improves. Notice most of the trees in the picture have low temporary branches. Here's one that was really tricky. Turned out pretty good. Strong central leader. It can be done on bigger trees too. It takes longer and is less desirable, but we don't generally recommend it. This is an adolescent tree. Once they hit maturity, you're not going to make a central leader. I don't want anybody to leave this room and go home and attack their jacaranda with bore structure and try and put a leader in it. Don't do that. So this is Robert Phillips just doing this particular tree. We did a seminar on this subject matter showing how it works. The tree's response was quite good. What we're trying to avoid is this, folks. See this failing? This is not a good situation. This large oak had this huge failure here, and it causes problems. And if you're under it, it causes real problems. This is an oak with a strong central leader, both round. Both round-headed tree. The outside form of the tree is the same. The structure is different. So, and I also wanted to make a comment that it's not as important on small growing trees. This is a Lagostromia or a crepe myrtle. Notice it has no central leader. This is my house. I am not trying to make a central leader out of it. Having said that, we advocate for the training of the form because it's easier to teach the workers and it's easier to get the clearance. So the take-home message is aspect ratio and structure is important. And when they're the same size as the leader, they grow at the same rate. If you have codominance, you can slow it down and have the leader go up. That's really important. That you can do it later in the tree's life. It is less desirable. It's better to do it when the plant's young. I have 3 kids. They're 12, 13, and 15. If I didn't spend any time with them until they're 12, 13, and 15, they're probably not going to turn out good, right? So I'm an advocate for invest the money in the right time, specifying to the nurseries, because the landscape architects are so critical because you deal with the customer, the contractor, and you set the rules. Thou shalt do this, thou shalt not do that. And if the landscape architect community is not engaged in this process, you can't make change. We've worked on this subject matter for 20 years, and it's starting to get out into the industry. It's actually starting to improve, but engaging your side of the discipline is critical, and that's why I was willing to fly down and back, because you guys actually are getting in the room trying to make some change. So this is what this is what you use in your real world. This is crown observation. So what we do on our plans is we put a lot of information in the detail as well as the specification, because how many contractors read the spec book, right? Let's see, where's the details? Okay, we bid it, go. If it's in both, they can't argue, I didn't see that. No, it's in the detail. And by the way, it's in the spec on page 465, but it's right there on the detail. And we brought it for low branch trees and different form of multi-trees. And so there's 75 details that deal with everything from root pruning at planting to tree structure and irrigation. And it is open source and free to use. This urban tree foundation thing, you can erase it and you can change it. So, and then on our details on planting, we show the same thing. And we point out central leader, because we want the contractor to get used to seeing that, and we want the nurseries to get the calls for it. We don't want to get the poorly structured plants, because the tree lives a long time. It's not an annual. It lives a long time. So what we did is we put together specifications, and these are the nurserymen we're trying to get together to work, to have classes, and then put together a document of how to do it. What we missed was the landscape architects. And without the folks sitting in this room, it doesn't work. So anyway, I show this because this is, I think, what's the botanical garden in San Diego? It's a quell. Yeah. So sorry, what is it?
It's now called San Diego.
Okay. So this is an Ulmus parvifolia, and in their parking lot they have Chinese elms, and we did half of them, and we've pruned them every year. And the car, you could walk by it, you have beautiful, strong central leader. This one, all the branches are coming at the same place. People are starting to hit it, and now folks are starting to whack on it, volunteers, because it's in the way. I would argue to the landscape architect community that the tree is the biggest structure you have to work with, and that the structure of the plant is important. And so anyway, that is my 2 cents on this subject matter. I hope did I go too long?
No.
I'll try to go fast. Okay. Let's see, how did I do? Time? I'm okay?
Right on.
Okay.
You practice.
No, I didn't. But any question? But I want to get to the other speaker. So I fly out at 6 if there's...
No, I think,
Okay.
I think you brought some really great points that I know are new to me. So I'd love for you to answer
Okay.
questions, and then we'll give you back on the
Okay.
Hey, Brian. A very good presentation as always. Do you want to take a moment to speak about the importance of spacing the branches along the trunk from the bottom up?
And the question is, talk a little bit about spacing the branches along the trunk. And this gets back to the core, often misunderstanding about how trees work. There's that things stay where they're come out, and they just grow fatter in diameter. And if you look at a big oak, and we have beautiful ocean and bay and palms, so we don't have good things to point, but big trees, large growing trees, could space branches sometimes 10 feet apart. And when you have branches clustered too close together, it tends to compete with the leader and slow that down. So spacing scaffolds is really important. And that can be done over a period of time, if that makes sense. Question?
So let's say there is an issue and you're designing a job and you have a certain height that you need. That specification should be given to the nursery.
Correct. So the question, and so that's really important. If you have a certain branch height, either you have to dictate that to the contractor or the nursery. But the more information the nursery has on what you're trying to get, the better. And so we send the nursery or force the contractor, send the nursery specifications. Often I call the nursery on our jobs. I might, I don't talk to Jim so much as he's in San Diego now and I'm in Visalia, but I actually, right, wrong, or indifferent, call the production person and say, hey, this is what I want, this is the structure, make sure what goes on the truck is good, you mind taking a look, and build that relationship with the growers to get good quality trees. It's a lot of what I've seen over the last 20 years is not so good. We waste tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on trees doing it wrong. Everything from infrastructure to girdling roots to pruning and it's somewhat unfortunate because nobody likes to go look at a project that you put a lot into and things went south on you. Are there any other questions, comments, criticisms too? We're good with that.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. Question, how soon after planting should the corrective pruning start?
Great question. The question was how soon after planting should the corrective pruning start? And I'm going to say at planting. Our specifications have the contractor, if you're comfortable with the particular contractor, make corrective cuts in the field. There's a research study done at University of Colorado somewhere in the 70s that said, well, you'll slow the growth if you prune at planting or early pruning, and probably everyone's sitting in this room has heard don't prune the plant for like 3 or 4 years because it'll slow it down. Basically, when they did that research study, they pruned the plants and then they ripped them out of the ground and weighed them. And they were on purple leaf plums, which are not even relevant. And the plant that they pruned at planting weighed a little bit less, but it got growth where you wanted it, not where you didn't want it. So it doesn't mean you attack the plant or needlessly remove leaf area. Leaf area is good. Plants like their leaves. Structure is huge. And you think of travel time, and what the folks that work in the municipalities will tell you is we only get so many passes or trips to the tree. If you walk by a defect, next time you show up, the defect's going to be more significant. And you walk by it again, it's going to be more significant every time you see it. So right when you see it, that's the time to do it, when it goes in the ground. What I do is I tell the nursery, please don't send me anything with a defect, because I'm paying for that tree. And I want them to do it. And the other thing I notice is if you prune a tree in front of somebody that doesn't know what's going on, they think you're hurting it. Oh, you're hurting the tree, or I just paid for that branch. You just cut it off. What the hell are you doing? So I like it to happen not necessarily in front of the client until I have a chance to explain to them. But we do explain, hey, when you're doing a Home Depot parking lot, and everybody likes to do the fancy projects, but let's face it, you're going to do the Flying J gas station or the Home Depot parking lot or something. You're going to do those, the strip malls. If the owner understands that, hey, there's a program and we're going to get these trees above the signs of the people that are paying the leases, and this is the strategy, so you can get the high canopy of shade and the aesthetics, and this is how it's going to happen over the first 10 years, you've really left them with something. Because left to their own maintenance program, they're going to whack them. And it's just going to be this ugly thing that's out there. You're going to drive by and say, yeah, it's a Home Depot parking lot, but God, it's crappy. Look at those things. So, good.
On multi-trunk trees, do you apply the same techniques?
We stay away from, what I try to do is work with low branch trees than I do multi-trunk. For example, sycamores. The native sycamore is commonly multi-trunk tree, and folks like them. I like 3 trunks too. But how those are grown is they grow up the tree, then they whack it at about 6 inches above grade, which develops those codominant stems. That's not a natural thing. That's done at the nursery. And then you have all that stress develop there. And I see a lot of failures in the landscape. What I prefer personally is trees that are grown 3 in a box, separated, or trees that are low branched and brought up somewhat codominant for that form. And so I try to stay away from, and you can read it, it's that bark inclusion issue. And I think I can show, oh shoot. You can see all the slides that I got rid of. To trim it down. So this sort of form where you would have this sort of form as opposed to and low branched. So you don't have all your scaffolds coming at one spot. So there is a market for a low branch tree or a multi sort of form. Quercus agrifolius, for example, they're all over the place, and a lot of them are like this. And I look at them break. We just had a 132, 132-inch box, 1 tree per truck, fail on a job that was like that. And let me tell you, that's expensive. The tree was expensive, the planting was expensive, the cleaning up the failure was expensive. You're talking about a $40,000 problem there. It's not good. So it's going to take time to get things perfectly dialed in. There are folks working on it. You reward those that are doing a good job with your specifications, and that drives the marketplace. The landscape architects have more to do with tree structure than arborists by far, because you specify the plants, and that's getting something with good structure out of the gates is huge. I do appreciate you have.
Just one.
Yep. No.
Temporary branching.
Yes.
Constant discussion with clients on, they want to see that tree form. So I try to strike some middle ground and just tell contractors, okay, just take off the first couple of branches, 18 inches, 24.
Yep.
When is a good time
To keep going up.
During, obviously during plant establishment is not, but a year out at.
You could. It's called live crown ratio. If you're taking up 18, 24, 36 inches on an 8-foot tall tree, your live crown ratio is still really good, because what you generally see is 7 to 8 feet of clear trunk and 3 branches at the top. If you're getting plants like that, you're already well ahead of the game. So it's like, show the client a little leg, meaning give them some trunk is what and if you give them some trunk, then they'll buy it. They'll be less going. My wife, who hears more about this stuff than she could ever want to know, said, get those temporary branches off the coastal live oak so I can see my door, and do it now. And so, they don't have to be there forever. But so I want to be fair. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Brian.